Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Wrassingh Show. And today's episode is a special one, as we are being joined by somebody who is a superstar in all senses. 6 feet tall, weighing at 233 pounds, the longest reigning FSW heavyweight champion with over 2,300 combined days as champion. From New York City, he is a real-life man of steel, actor, producer, pro wrestler. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present to you Mike Verna. Mike,
okay, hold on. Before I even say anything, I'm not sure I can even stand up or make sure that I can give you anything as good as that intro was. I was sitting here off camera. I was just fist pumping to myself. I'm like, that is awesome. That is awesome.
You're so nice, Mike. Like, I don't know if you're breaking kayfabe or not, but
listen, I'm telling you right now, if I don't like something, I'm going to tell you. That was awesome. That was awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very baby face-ish of you, but thank you so much, Mike. I love it. Thank you. First of all, it's so good to see you. Really, really humbled and honored to have you here. So, the Man of Steel himself on the Wrassingh Show. Can't get any better than that.
No, it cannot. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of people wonder if Superman's real. You got him in the flesh. You got him virtual, but close enough.
That's right. So, I mean, the Man of Steel, the title, it suits you better than it ever suited Henry Cavill. Let's just admit that.
And you say I'm nice. Yeah, I gotta hire you for my manager, my agent. You name it. That's it. It's funny that you mentioned the name because a lot of people do ask me. They say, "Where does the name come from?" And when I first started training, obviously when you get closer to your first show, you try to figure out what the hell is my name going to be? What's the gimmick? What's the moniker? And I had no idea. I just didn't want my name to not be Mike because in movies, it's different. You're playing a character, it's an hour long and that's it. With pro wrestling, it's an everyday thing. You're constantly living that brand. So I didn't want to be called something that I wasn't because I wanted to make sure I can identify to it, So I knew I wanted to be Mike. I just didn't know what the name was going to be. What was going to be the gimmick? What was going to be the moniker? And I was training one day, and my trainer, Joel Maximo, from the SAT, I was wearing a Superman tank top, and it was summer, so my hair was very, very wet at the time with sweat, and I started developing that little curl. And he said, why don't we just call you Superman? I said, Superman? I said, I don't know if we could just be called Superman. He's like, no, you look like Superman. You look more like Superman than most actors that played him. I said, now you're just blowing my head up. I said, how about this? Why don't we go with the Man of Steel? And I said, and we both looked at each other. And we said, yeah, that's it. And it's to this day, it's here. It's still the same thing.
That's right. It's very well fitting. And, that's why I love wrestling. It's because, as kids, when you fall in love with superheroes or stuff, you grow up to realize that all of that superhero stuff, it's not real. It's just fantasy, right? But if you fall in love with professional wrestling as a kid, you grow up to realize that the heroes that you always thought were heroes are actually heroes and they're real life heroes. And that's Mike Verna, the real life Man of Steel right here.
Yeah, I love that analogy right there. That's a perfect way to explain it. I think that's what I think that's what makes most wrestlers kind of hold on to it too, like knowing the idea of being able to be that real life, whatever they want to be. For me, it's the real life Man of Steel. For other people, it's the real life supervillain. But it's a great thing to have that opportunity because whether it's kids, adults, they look at you as that. You are that brand. And I always tell people, I think one of my biggest compliments as a performer when it comes to identifying to my gimmick is when people aren't familiar with me or people haven't seen me for the first time or are seeing me for the first time, and then they hear my music, which starts with the Superman chords and a guitar version. And a lot of people look at, he calls himself the Man of Steel. He's got this thing. What's he going to look like? But as soon as I walk out of the curtain, every fan always says, as soon as you walk out of that curtain, I got it. I understood exactly what the deal was. And I said, that's the best thing I can ask for. That means I did my job.
It's awesome. It's all your hard work at work. But, before we even dive into the interview and start talking about wrestling, since you are the Man of Steel, I'm so desperate to ask you this. Are you a DC fan or are you a Marvel fan?
Definitely a DC fan. So growing up, ironically enough, I was not big on comic books. I loved Superman and Batman. Those were the two things I loved. But it wasn't like a guy that was so, I didn't know every single universe. I didn't know every single hero, every single villain. I was just a big Batman and Superman fan. As I got older and I actually took on this name, this gimmick, this character, obviously I needed to do my due diligence. So I did my research. I started understanding a little bit, thing or two about the Superman origins and Superman characters. And I really started enjoying what I was seeing. And now once the Marvel Universe exploded and every movie that they've come out with in the last couple of years have been epics, it's hard not to be a fan of them. Now, the DC guy in me really wants to see, them kind of step up their game a little bit and really go toe-to-toe with Marvel. I'd say I cheat on the DC side, but Marvel's been kicking ass. They've been kicking ass.
Absolutely. So since we're comparing stuff, let's compare this. Attitude Era or the current wrestling era? Which one would you go for?
The Attitude Era is the reason why I'm a wrestler right now. That is the reason why I'm a wrestler. I grew up in 1991. I was born in 1991, so I grew up in the 90s. I grew up on Shawn Michaels during his heyday, Triple H before he became Triple H, The Rock, Stone Cold, DX, ECW, WCW. I mean, all that era, the Attitude Era, the Monday Night Wars, that's what made me a wrestling fan. It was the storytelling, the characters, the storylines, the risque content, I felt like I was watching something that was larger than life. Now, it's different. It's different. That's the word I'm going to say because I feel like now it is larger than life. I feel like the WWE specifically is a larger than life brand, but the content itself isn't what's grabbing. I'm not gravitating to it like I used to. Granted, I do it for a living, so I shouldn't view it as the same thing when I wasn't a wrestler. But I mean, the Attitude Era I think is just uncomparable. I can't find an era in wrestling that is better than that.
Wow, thanks for the honest answer, Mike. And you can tell just by this answer that this interview is going to be very candid, very honest. I'm loving it. And since we're rolling with these this or that questions, I'm going to hit you with another one. Are you a Vince K. McMahon fan or a Tony Khan fan?
Because but no bias at all. I love Tony Khan. I love him to death. I think he's one of the best owners of all business. I think he understands his product. He understands his audience. He understands his roster. He understands the people he hires. He understands what he wants from the company. And a lot of, now that I think AEW is starting to get off of their honeymoon phase and they're starting to become more of a big business brand, people are starting to become a little bit more critical of what we do and what AEW is. And I see now that Tony is starting to kind of, stick up for himself a little bit more where it's like, guys, take it easy. I'm doing what I'm doing right here. And I feel like Tony, out of all the wrestling promoters on the independents, even Vince McMahon, he thoroughly understands his audience to a T. And I think he's willing to accept the fact that he's going to cater to those 1 million people that view it a week, rather than trying to do what Vince McMahon does, which is trying to generate outside interest into the brand while losing the hardcore fan. So I think that's really the biggest difference between the two. Forget about the in-ring style and what you see on the actual content. I think the difference between Tony Khan and Vince McMahon is that Tony is catering 100% to the people who love and watch his program, where Vince is past that now. I think Vince is ready to just say, I want to be the next Disney. I want to be the next Fox, no pun intended to that deal. I want to be the next, Paramount, he wants to be that guy, where WWE is so much of its own entity that it's a brand in its own way. It's not just professional wrestling. I think you see that now a lot with, the recent releases, the rebranding of NXT. I think they're really the characters themselves is really what's like I said, as an actor as well, which is very interesting for me because I get to see things through a different lens. I really get to see the showbiz sides of wrestling, and the characters that you're seeing now come up in the NXT ranks. They're really, really gimmicks. Whether to a T, almost to the point where it's like, this is a television show. This isn't pro wrestling. This is a television show. Or I'm back in 1980 again, even though I wasn't born, and I'm watching, Sergeant Slaughter take on the Iron Sheik. That's how I see it. But again, that's a thing that a lot of wrestling fans loved coming into their own, which was the over the top gimmicks, the PG content, just the over the top storytelling. So maybe they could kind of bring that fan base back. At the same time, I hope that they don't lose their hardcore fan base. So that's why I choose Tony Khan all day. I know it was a little bit of an elaborate answer, but I had to speak my mind on it.
I love the answer. That answer was like music to my ears because nobody, I've never heard anybody, just point out the differences between Tony Khan and Vince McMahon the way you did. Very accurate, very on point. I loved it. So you are no stranger to either of their promotions, Tony Khan or Vince McMahon. You've appeared on NXT, and you're basically a regular on AEW's Dark, and you've also appeared on their other program, that's Elevation.
Yes.
How has your experience been working with All Elite Wrestling yourself?
So that was the number one thing I wanted to say, is that no bias whatsoever. That's why I genuinely feel that way about Tony. But I can't speak highly enough about All Elite Wrestling. I really can, and I'm not trying to be politically correct. It helps that most of the locker room I came up with. I'm very good friends with a lot of people in that locker room. Alex Reynolds and Tony Nese were my first two trainers. They started my career. Joel Maxwell finished my career. They started it. So to have two trainers in that locker room that speaks volumes of itself, you know. But just the camaraderie, the grassroots, atmosphere where everyone's just they're trying to do what they always wanted to do in the Indies when they weren't given that chance, and now they're running with it. They're becoming a really they're becoming a company. That's the word I like to say with it, because a lot of people, even the people in the locker room that I've spoken to, it's like the first couple of years, it was kind of like, let's just see what we could do. Let's see if we can survive. Now that they've survived and succeeded, it's more like, now we're a company. What do we do next? How do we make ourselves as legitimate as possible so we're here for the long run? And I think you're starting to see that now with the recent signings. CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Adam Cole, the list goes on. Kyle O'Reilly, right off NXT. I mean, there is a morale with AEW right now where I think it's just like, if we're not happy at NXT, we have a spot that we could possibly go to and really find out craft, hold what we want. And I think that's almost more interesting than the actual Monday Night Wars or the Wednesday Night Wars. I think it's more interesting to see that the wrestlers want to work there rather than want to beat them. To me, that's something that's very alarming, because you look at it from a standpoint of, it doesn't look like NXT is the place to be anymore. It doesn't look like people want to be there anymore. I mean, you look at Mustafa Ali. I mean, Mustafa Ali.
Yeah.
I mean, he just had his most recent, public release. You know what I'm saying? He just said it himself. And I looked at it the other day and I read it and I said, oh my God, like that's deep. That takes courage. That takes courage. And I respect the hell out of it.
Absolutely. So the transition from NXT to AEW has been pretty smooth for a lot of people who have transitioned between the two companies. And speaking of transition, I mean, you've been wrestling for close to 10 years now, full time. You started in about 2013 full time, and when you were about 20 to 21 years of age, so very early age. So as somebody who has a background in baseball, how easy or how difficult was it to transition from baseball to the world of pro wrestling?
Well, I'll tell you right now, the hardest decision I made in that young age was to decide not to play college baseball to pursue pro wrestling. I reached the point at the end of my high school career where I said, okay, I know I'm not going to be a pro baseball player. I just knew it. You have to have realistic expectations. Would I have been a great college baseball player? I think absolutely. Could I have played independent pro ball? Absolutely. But I just knew that I wasn't going to reach the ceiling that I wanted to. And the unfortunate thing is it's funny because now baseball is my passion. I mean, I love coaching. I love being on the field. I love everything about it. But when you're a player and you're working so hard, especially during high school, those really interesting times of your life, you lose a little bit of that passion. You lose a little bit of that fire. And you start trying to find fire elsewhere, whether it's partying, let's be real, girls, other things. Wrestling was something that I kind of reignited. So, I think everybody goes through a period where they're such a hardcore fan, and then they fall out of it, and then they come back in, and then they're back in. That's where I was. That's where I was towards the end of high school. I actually found myself becoming a real fan again. And with that, I said, everything happens for a reason. For me to become this really obsessed with wrestling again at 17 years old, something's telling me that this is what I need to do. So once I decided, okay, I wasn't going to play baseball, which I said was the hardest decision of my life, and I knew I was going to commit 100% of my, like you said, I debuted at 21. So, I mean, from 18, I started training in 2011. So from 18, 19 to 21, it was like, those are some really influential years. But I think the biggest thing that helped me is that I did so much training, and I still continue to play baseball. That was a big thing too. I did continue, but just not at a school level. It was more of a men's league, just more strictly for fun. That's where I was in my career. So once I did that, I realized that the thing that helped me the most was the constant training, the constant working out, because the one void I missed when I left baseball was the practice, the like I said, the workout, the training, and I was able to easily transition that right over to wrestling, where I could be in the gym and I could be working out for a bigger purpose, not just to look good, but I'm working my ass off, I'm training my ass off for this, and that's the drive as an athlete you always need. You need that drive. Sometimes, if you're not a wrestler or an athlete by trade, and you're become a pro wrestler, whether it's your bodybuilder, whether I mean, at this rate, it could be anything. Anyone can be a wrestler at this point. I think an athlete is the people that transition over the easiest because they have that drive, because the thing about pro wrestling is that you never stop training. You never stop the athleticism behind it. There's, the entertainment aspect is the hardest thing to learn. But if you're an athlete, that transition is very easy. It's harder, it's different, but it's easy.
Wow. Thanks for the answer, Mike. But one thing that a lot of people forget when it comes to wrestling training is that you're not just training to be a good wrestler, an athletic wrestler, but you're also training to make sure that any person you step into the ring with is safe. You're training to be a safe wrestler. Now, while training, how challenging did you find it to be a safe wrestler? How hard is it?
It's very hard, and that's a great question, because a lot of people, when they ask, like, when they break the fourth wall, they break kayfabe, and you're talking to someone that you're comfortable with, and they say, "How does it go? Like, what do you do?" I said, "What makes us a professional wrestler is that if we were driving from New York to Massachusetts, and it was a 5-hour drive, and we got stuck in traffic, which made it a 7-hour drive, and bell time's at 8, and I'm getting there at 7:45." That means that I need to make sure that I can get in that ring with my opponent, know what I need to do without saying anything, and make sure the match is good and make sure he's safe. That's what makes you a professional. So in order to do that, you really need to know how to do it. It's not just for everybody. I think that's the hardest thing for an athlete to transition into. For me, the hardest thing when I started is understanding the work of it. So I remember I would be training. I was doing a training drill with Alex Reynolds, and it was a heat drill. And it was basically, he was going to give me heat. And for people who were listening, that's not really sure what that is. That's the time in a match where the baby face is down. They're getting themselves beat up by the heel, and the heel is embracing the crowd and all that stuff. Sorry if that, is a little bit revealing, but it is what it is. So we're doing this drill, and he's beat me up, and he's putting heat on me, and I keep coming up. So I'm thinking, as an athlete, if I was a boxer, if I got knocked down, I would come right back up. But the art of wrestling is the sell, the sympathy, the storytelling. And that was so hard for me to grasp early on. I don't know what it was. I just don't know. It was just a different level of comfort. You like I said, when you're an athlete, it's 100% all the time. You get knocked down, you get right back up. In wrestling, you get knocked down, you make it look good.
Absolutely on point. And I smiled big when you used the term art of wrestling. And whenever I hear these terms used by anybody, I can tell that this person genuinely loves professional wrestling, because you don't hear that term art of wrestling being used by a lot of people. I love that. Love that, Mike.
And that's the thing. I'll be honest with you, I think you hit it right on the head when you said, the love of wrestling. I really, really love wrestling as an art form. I really do. If you can mix athlete and art together, I mean, that's what gets me hooked on wrestling. I think, not to get too off topic, but we're missing most this, in this day and age, is we're missing the storytelling that we had, I think, in the past. And wrestling, that's a subjective thing. A lot of people can love the stories that they see now. They can love the style. And I love the style too. It pushes me. If I have to be fast paced and I have to work a certain spot, it keeps that athleticism that I love in there. But I think what I really love about wrestling is being able to tell a story in the ring. And as long as we're able to keep that going, I think we're in a good situation.
Absolutely, Mike. Absolutely agreed with you. Now, I know that you look up to Macho Man Randy Savage as the wrestler. Yeah. But we also know, and it is true, that a lot of your fans, they compare your wrestling style to that of a wrestler who should not be named. And
correct.
Right? How do you feel about those comparisons?
It's funny. I'll let you know a little story. When I was debuting, and like I said, we were trying to come up with the name. One of the names that were pitched to me was that they wanted me to be because I was getting compared so much in the ring, just the build, the look. They said, "Why don't you go with something like a Rabid Wolverine or something like that?" I said, "Guys, you're gonna end my career before it even starts." And, all kidding aside, the sad thing is that if you take away the personal things that happen, if you look at it from an in-ring standpoint, he was one of the best wrestlers. I would lie if I tell you I don't study him. It would be a detriment to my career not to watch tape of Benoit. What he did is unforgivable. There's a reason why he's blackballed from the business. But the wrestling side of it, as a pro wrestler who's trying to better myself, he's the type of guy I have to watch. Benoit, Guerrero, Malenko, even Bret Hart. And then you look at Savage, The Rock, all that melting pot of wrestling is what we need. But yeah, no, you were spot on about that. I mean, it's a comparison. It's tough because luckily we're at the point now, I think, where it's not so much comparing yourself, getting compared to him. It's becoming a new version of that style. You know what I'm saying? And that I appreciate. When you first break in, those comparisons are heavy. They're heavy because it's like, oh man, listen, he looks like that. He looks like that. Thankfully, it never hurt my career. It only helped because I think I was able to build a new legacy with that, under 6 foot heavyweights, which, you don't see that much anymore. Usually if people are under 6 feet, they're not necessarily heavyweights, they're kind of the cruiserweight style. But if you're 6 foot or just under and you're a heavyweight, that's a whole other genre. That's a whole other style.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you said that it didn't hurt your career. I mean, with the kind of personality that you have and the talent that you possess, nothing can hurt your career, I can tell you that.
You're the man, brother. You're the man.
So, we know that you're into acting. Apart from just wrestling, you're into acting. You've been in major commercials, series, short films. So have you always been this good, at cutting promos and acting? Or did you have to take a lot of classes and do a lot of practice for that as well?
Great question. So I will, to pat myself on the back, I've always been kind of charismatic. I've never really been shy. I think that started in high school, just being that type of guy, jock, just enjoying high school as you would. I've always been very friendly. I love talking to people. Even when I go out now, I have a friend group of 30 friends, that I'm still friends with to this day from high school. And I want more. I want more people. The more people around you, the merrier. I'm the opposite of an introvert. I love my introverted moments, but I'm an extrovert to the
love
team. So all that was easy, and even my first match, I had a lot of butterflies in my stomach. I was nervous, but as soon as I got out there, I love that. I love that. So the promo side of things was easy. What was interesting about acting is I had no acting background. Like I said, baseball was my thing. That's all I did. So I had no acting background, but because of wrestling, and because of cutting promos and because of the improv that you have and the acting in the ring, acting was easy. And once I realized that, I said, oh, wow, not only do I like this, but I'm pretty good at it. And that's when you start taking classes, because you can't just get into acting and say, okay, I'm a wrestler, I can cut a promo, I can be an actor. You got to understand the craft of acting, the art of acting, like I said with wrestling. If you don't know that, if you don't know, the A's to Z's of a craft that you're pursuing or a career you're pursuing, then you probably shouldn't do it. And I can tell by you take this very seriously, A, by the presentation, and B, by the research you did on me. And that's the thing, for us wrestlers to get on podcasts, we got to make sure that we're doing something that's a good platform for us, that's the right way. So the same way that you've been complimenting me, I got to say the same thing for you. You've been doing a kick-ass job already, and I'm loving this interview already. But that transition between the acting and the wrestling, I mean, it was easier for me. The greatest thing about it is that my career started very random with acting. My agent, who's still my agent to this day, he was at a show scouting wrestlers in New York. Now, when you're in New York, it's like LA. New York and LA is the mecca for any kind of showbiz. Yeah. And they go to these wrestling shows because they kind of try to find, okay, who's the next face? Who's the next guy with a good body that could potentially be, model or a commercial person or work in print for magazines? So he had emailed me, and I looked, I was like, I have no acting experience. What do you want me for? He goes, you're a wrestler. You can do it. And I said, okay, you want to give this a shot? Let's give this a shot. And then once I booked my first series gig, it took a couple of years. I think I signed on with them at the end of 2018, beginning of 2019 to be safe. And I didn't get my first gig until May of 2020, which was my first real gig, which was the Philadelphia Cream Cheese National Commercial, which was...
The world has seen it. The world has seen that.
The world has seen it. Exactly. The world has seen it. So that was my first real gig. But I did a lot of non-union stuff. I did a lot of independent stuff just to get my experience and my feet wet. But once I landed that was it. That was it. Camping World, Magic Spoon, Budweiser, the list goes, Monkey Shoulder Whiskey, me and Anthony Bowens did in the summer, so the list goes on, which I'm lucky, I'm blessed. But, for me, I think the telltale fork of the road will be when I land a really big gig, hopefully in TV or movies. That kind of has that Rock situation where you have to figure out, okay, because for me, the interesting thing is I'm a full-time actor and a full-time wrestler at the same time.
That's right.
It doesn't usually happen. Usually it's you wrestle first, you become an actor. Or you act first and then you do wrestling like David Arquette. So it's a tough little thing to kind of balance both, because there have been times like I just shot a Budweiser commercial a couple weeks ago. That was a rush call that I got literally the night before. That same day, I had a wrestling show, and I had to pull off the wrestling show to do the commercial for obvious reasons. One pays a little better than the other sometimes. So I had to jump on that, but it's tough because you're going to reach a point where you land something that's really big, fingers crossed, say your prayers every day about it, and then you have to watch and you have to figure it out. Okay, what do I do next? Do I wrestle or do I keep pursuing this?
Absolutely. Knock on the wood, Mike. I'm pretty sure the next time we'll be talking about your next major film coming out or something.
I love to hear that. I love it. I love that manifestation.
Yeah, it's going to happen. With the drive, the passion, the talent that you possess, I don't see it not happening in the near future. It has to happen. It's great. And just like you said, you have a big circle of friends, family, people obviously love you. How did they react to your decision to pursue professional wrestling as a career? When professional wrestling, in the whole wide world is often seen as fake, is seen as phony. How did your cool friends react to it?
My friends loved it. My family, on the other hand, did not. In the beginning, so watch me play baseball in my life as a sport is one thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
My dad specifically used to say wrestling was phony. He wasn't a huge fan of it all. That was a word that phony shit was something that he always used to say. But he always knew the risks that were involved. There's no doubt about it. He knew the risks. He understood the risks. My mom's a nervous wreck to begin with, so she doesn't want anything to do with it. So when they found that I was doing this, I had to hide it. I did my first couple of months on the low key, and then one of my friends actually at a game, I was playing ball, and my dad was there watching, and one of my friends said, "Oh man, have you seen Mike's doing this thing? It's really cool." He's like, "What?" He's like, "Oh, pro wrestling." He's like, "Oh my God, he did it." Then we had that talk, and I said, "Look, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to protect myself." And the biggest accomplishment, I think, for me is for my family to see me work and to say, okay, he did what he wanted to do, and he did it. He went out there and he did it. He got the job done. And it opened so many doors for him on other levels. He stood safe, thank God. And that was the biggest thing, because they were really against it, and now they accept it fully. They appreciate it, and they're even a fan. So that's a good thing.
Beautiful. It's all your hard work that's made that difference. Incredible, Mike. I mean, you said that you'd keep yourself safe, but I've seen you've been in a CZW ring. That's for keeping a promise, right? How did you end up there?
Oh man, so I did it. That CZW match, ironically enough, was during the transition period. So I worked for Chikara full time.
Yeah.
And usually when you work for Chikara, you can't work for CZW. It was just one of those things. Wrestling bullshit 101. This particular show was during a period where CZW was transitioning a bit from hardcore to more TV style. So they needed more TV style wrestlers. So DJ had reached out to me. He was trying to book me for a while, but I couldn't do it because of Chikara. At the time, I told Quackenbush, I said, "Look, Mike, I want to try to wrestle all these major companies in the Northeast. I'm just going to do this once, and we'll see what happens." He said, "Okay." I wrestled the show. It was a 4-way match. Me, Wheeler Yuta, I think Gary J was in. I forget everyone that was in. Was it 8? No, I don't know. It was a Fatal 4 match. It's somewhere on Cage. We can find it. But it had nothing to do with hardcore. Ironically enough, I've had much more hardcore matches on companies that are not known for hardcore. Chaotic Wrestling, Woburn, Massachusetts against Chase Del Monte. I had the Woburn Street Fight. I've never bled more in a wrestling ring than I did during that match. And that was something. That's usually a family-friendly company. So it's funny that you say that CZW. How did a pretty boy like me end up in CZW? How did I end up bleeding profusely in a family-friendly show? The art, baby. It's the art. It's the wrestling art.
And you wrestle for multiple promotions, just like you said. AEW, Chikara, Beyond, NYWC, CZW, all these promotions. Do you have one favorite? One promotion that you have a lot of fond memories attached to?
Well, currently, right now, I'm wrestling for about 3 companies. So as the acting started kicking up, I started kind of downsizing my wrestling schedule a little bit just for more availability. Instead of doing these trips, to the other side of the states or the Midwest and all that stuff. I said, let me stay in my area. Let me pack up my schedule in my area. The companies that pay me well, that treat me well, that I have fun with, and then if there's a major opportunity outside the Northeast, obviously I'll get in the car, I'll get in a plane, I'll go. But when it comes to making money, having fun, doing the right thing, I can do that all in the Northeast. We're the Mecca. We are the Mecca of wrestling right now. I think the Northeast is that, especially the New England area. I'm from New York, but New England is one of the best breeding grounds for good wrestling. So between Northeast wrestling, chaotic wrestling, beyond wrestling, and also outlaw wrestling, those 4 companies. Those are the guys that I put all my effort into 100%. They've been with me since day one of their inception, day one of my getting over the thing. They've always stuck with me. They've always used me. I love being a part of them. The shows are like rock shows. I mean, especially Outlaw and Beyond. The Outlaw and Beyond are like, you go to it's like a night out drinking with your friends. But it's wrestling. That's I have so much fun with that. And then Northeast Wrestling and Chaotic are like federations in their own. It's TV wrestling without TV cameras. And that's the stuff I love, So it's like I'm able to have these great moments on both sides of the spectrum. The party, the fun of wrestling, and the professional. Not saying that the other two aren't professional, but and not saying that the other two aren't fun, but they're just so different. You have like a rock show environment, and then you have like a Hollywood environment with the other two. So for me, I love that.
That's lovely. That's lovely. And we already spoke about your favorite promotions. What about your favorite opponents so far? Anybody you loved getting into the ring with? And before you answer that, I must say that my favorite match of yours is against Mike Bennett, the one that you recently did in I believe November of 2021.
Yeah, Northeast.
It was a great match, and something that really intrigued me about the match was that both of you, it seemed like you were in such pain, but both of you were enjoying yourselves like you were living your life in that match.
Oh yeah, you could clip this clip and tag Mike in it because we were talking about that after that match. That's the first time me and him touched, and the chemistry we had and the fun everything was just kind of rolling the way we wanted to. I remember we were talking about the match and we just both I was popping. I was like getting excited. I'm like, you understand what I want from this match before we even started calling it. Like we understood where we were, and I thought everything just worked out perfectly. And I have a feeling Mike is going to become one of my best opponents because I know that we're going to cross paths again, and we're going to do the same thing that we did in Northeast Ring, and we're going to have a blast with it. But I mean, some of my favorite opponents of all time: Flip Gordon, JT Dunn. He used to be Casanova, but now he's Carmelo Hayes in WWE. I mean, talk about and those are 3 guys out of the New England scene, the NEPWA, the New England Pro Wrestling Academy. It just shows you, like I said, the skill level that they get out of that territory, just the amount of people that they're able to produce, just really grade A talent. I mean, the list goes on. I've had great matches with Warbeard Hansen. I mean, it's Jack Swagger, even Jake Hager. I mean, it's hard for me to when I get asked that question. I think that's the biggest mind explosion of my life because it's like, damn, there's so many. But I'm happy you did it because it kept me on my toes, and I'm happy you brought the Mike Bennett match because that's a recent one that I would put very high on my list because of how good it was.
Absolutely. And since we just spoke about Mike Bennett, Mike and Mike, it also reminds me that you are one of the very few wrestlers, who in most promotions has been himself, has been Mike. No other ring name, just Mike. Yeah. So is that something you prefer yourself?
100%. And like I said, it's funny too because I don't even think there's a lot of Mikes in wrestling.
That's right.
Mike Bennett, Mike Awesome, Mikey Whipwreck, Mike Verna. I'm sure there's more. No disrespect to anyone else, but it's not a common name in wrestling. But that didn't really go into much for me when I was making my name. The biggest thing about it was for me is that I really wanted to make sure that I can identify with this because this is your whatever name, whatever character you come up with. This is your brand for the rest of your career. Unless you're able to kind of change it up as you go, which we've seen, and that's fine. I go from heel to face to corporate to Hollywood to Superman to this. You're still Mike Verna. You're still yourself. So to me, that was always like the thing that I wanted. I wanted to make sure that I can identify fully with this character. And I remember like during the name suggestions, one of the names that they brought up was Ethan. Like there's plenty of Ethans in wrestling. That's for sure. And I don't look like Ethan. Either doesn't work for me. You know what I'm saying? Vincent was one because they said, "Oh, be like Vincent Chase from Entourage." I was like, the TV show Entourage. I was like, that doesn't even have anything to do with it. You know? And they're like, yeah, but you have that Hollywood look. I'm not feeling that though. I said I need to be Mike. I want to be Mike. You know, and I just and the funny thing is my real name is Taverna, Taverna. When I was playing baseball, a lot of the guys would say Verna for short. So that just hit in for me really quick. I said, okay, I know Taverna is a little bit hard as a wrestling name. Maybe it's not as marketable. So I said, let's just cut that in half and let's just come with Verna, and it's worked. You know, Cena. Angle, these one syllable things. Two syllable names. They just roll off your tongue.
Genius, it's genius. So, how did you feel when WWE they renamed you to Mitch Taverna? That must have hurt.
It's funny because Steve Carino was a good buddy of mine. He did produce that match. That match that I did over there with Jackson Riker was produced by Robbie Brookside. But when they were coming up with names, they said we don't know what your name's going to be up there. And he's a big Philadelphia Philly fan, which is a big rival of the New York Mets. And I'm a big New York Mets fan. He's a big Philly fan. So he tried naming me Mike Piazza, who's one of the biggest, most famous Mets of all time. Because he said, when you get beat, I want Mike Piazza to get beat. So I was like, oh, you're bad. You're trouble. But the big thing, it was interesting because the WWE fans, the wrestling fans, they know who the hell I am. So I feel like WWE, I know they protect themselves and they want to make sure that, okay, I have to use our name. We can't use your name just in case you try to sue us, all that stuff. But just let me sign a waiver that's saying you have the rights to the name for the night. Go out there. I think people want to see, they want to react to Mike Verna performing.
That's right.
Win, lose, or draw. I laughed at the Mitch Taverna name. I think everyone kind of laughed a little bit with it. It was kind of like a little ha-ha moment. But they knew who Mike Verna was in there, and that's the key. Because when you look at Twitter at the end of the night, you see, all the mentions and the likes and the retweets. They're retweeting Mike Verna. They're saying Mike Verna debuted on NXT tonight. Mike Verna did this, not Mitch. Which I still laugh to this day. I think it was a funny, very, very interesting name to pick for me.
Oh yeah, definitely. And this reminds me of a very good friend of mine. We used to call each other brothers, and I know that you've been in the ring with him as well, Shad Gaspard. I was speaking with him once, and he was telling me how WWE, years after releasing him, they realized that Shad Gaspard was actually using his real name in the WWE, and they never realized it throughout all these years of employment.
Oh, wow. Good for him. May he rest in peace. Good for him.
It was a great guy. And in 2020, we lost a lot of great guys, men, women, due to the pandemic itself. And now we know that the pandemic is not fully gone. It's still around. It's still in some capacity, still here. So how is the independent circuit, going on right now? Is it still impacted by the whole thing?
I would say, yeah. I definitely not the way it was when it first started. I did an interview the other day, and they kind of asked a similar question about how did the pandemic, affect you as a wrestler. Yeah. And what it did for me was it was actually very eye-opening because it almost made me leave the business a bit because, the problem is that, when you're in a regular schedule with wrestling, for independent wrestling, it's every single weekend. So with weekends comes a lot of events that you miss, a lot of social gatherings you miss, a lot of big things you miss. It's just weddings, sometimes funerals, as sad as that sounds, you miss these things. And with the pandemic, it kind of gave me a lot of freedom. And when you're not training, again, the athlete in me needs to train. The gyms are closed. There are no wrestlings. There's only so many push-ups and sit-ups you can do in your house. You start losing a lot of bit of that drive that you had. And the saving grace for me was I was able to revitalize my social life, which it worked out because now I can balance it all. Back in the day, I wasn't balancing anything. I was just wrestle this, wrestle that. I don't care how much they pay me. And you don't realize how much it affects you, not only your body, but your mind. So when the pandemic happened, I said, okay, we'll bounce back. We'll be able to do this. But there was no light at the end of the tunnel with wrestling. Thank God 2 years later, now we're back to almost regular. But when it first happened, you didn't know when we were going to return. Right. And then we started doing these no fan studio matches where we would go into a building with no fans and we would just wrestle these matches. And I'm happy you're shaking your head because it's just not the same. It's just not the same. And I remember, man, I was getting hurt. I was bored. I wasn't enjoying it. I looked at myself and said, oh my God, like what is happening right now? And at the same time, remember, like I said, 2020, I landed the Philly commercial. So business was booming on the other side of the camera with that gig. So I was looking at it, I was like, what is wrestling? Like, what is wrestling at this point? Like, what is it? What is it doing for them? And then come December of 2019, 2020 rather, I started working with AEW. And that really helped revitalize my passion for it, which was a good thing. So, but the whole pandemic, that was a big thing for wrestlers. A lot of wrestlers were scared of like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do for money? What am I going to do for work? What am I going to do for my passion? All that stuff was tough. Now, luckily, we're pretty good. We haven't hit any major speed bumps in regards to like full cancellations. We've had a couple of rescheduling because we did have the recent outbreak with Omicron, but I had it during Christmas. It was very, very mild. I really didn't even know I was sick, to be honest with you. I'm stuffy now just because it's December. This is the same stuffiness I had 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, whatever it was. So, I didn't think anything of it. But luckily everyone's going good. The death toll is not where it was right now. Thank God. We should be okay. But who knows, right? Who knows?
Well, let's just pray that everything's okay. Yeah. That you're doing better. And since we're speaking of the pandemic, you are a part of the upcoming film Apophenia, which is about a man who isn't sure if his wife is being loyal to him while she's in quarantine with another man. So can you tell us about the filming process and your role in the film itself?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's an interesting concept, and the writer and director is one of my childhood best friends. Still wow. To this day. This is his first major feature film that he's directed, written, everything like that. So obviously, I got a small role in it. The problem with this is that this is basically a pandemic isolation type of movie. There's only 4 real characters that you constantly see. 5. I don't want to give too much away, but 5. That you really see on a constant basis. My role is at the beginning of the film. The main character is trying to make some money because the pandemic has ruined his job and he's got to pay rent. So he's at a poker game with a bunch of gangsters. So I happen to be one of the gangsters. But the movie itself it's a mix between The Shining, Raging Bull, Hereditary. It's I wouldn't call it horror. It's more of a psychological horror where you don't have a jump scare and you don't really see any blood and gore, but it messes with you, especially now during this isolated time that we went through. When this releases at the next couple of months, it should release. Editing's almost done with it. I just saw it, mind you. I saw the first rough cut of it about 2 weeks ago. So it was a trip. It was a trip for me, and I think a lot of people are going to love it. No bias at all because I'm a part of it. My friend made it, but it's going to be good. It stars Darren Barnett, he's really hot right now in Hollywood. He's done Never Have I Ever, which is a popular show on Netflix. Love Hard, a movie on Netflix. It may go on Netflix, the movie. It could either be Netflix or theaters. It's to be determined, but I have a feeling he's going to be very successful. I have a feeling it is very, very successful.
I'm pretty sure it will be very successful. So Apophenia coming out in a few months. Really looking forward to it. And I like how the film starts on a very high note, similar to how most AEW shows start. When AEW shows are on, they start on a very high note. Like they just give a CM Punk match or the biggest match of the first one. And that's what they did with the film itself. You are in the film in the very first.
There we go. Big. I love it.
I love it. So, Mike, it was great chatting with you. Absolutely loved it. So, from this talk that we just had, I guess it is safe to say that Mike Verna will, in the near future, will be All Elite.
We can only hope, right? We can only hope. Put it out into the universe.
That's right. So, would it be a spoiler or a prediction, or a very good prediction, if you were to join AEW? Would it be a spoiler if I say that you're going to join Team Taz?
You know how many people have said that? Since my first match in AEW, people said I was perfect for Team Taz. Hey, Taz, if you're recruited, buddy, and you need another New Yorker for your team, I'm the type of guy. I got a bad side to me. And trust me when I tell you, if Hook needs a heavy, I'm there for it.
I love it. Yeah, looking forward to it, Mike. Absolutely. And I must say, this is by far my absolute favorite interview that I've done here on the Wrassingh Show. Such a joy and a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
The feeling's mutual. This was an awesome experience. I'm happy that you were able to stay up late for me. You're in India. It's got to be what? Almost 2 o'clock in the morning? Almost 3 o'clock in the morning?
It's all worth it. All worth it for Mike Taverna.
I
We're
will
gonna
say
be.
this right now, I will absolutely be back. If you ever need me, I will absolutely be back. This was a pleasure and a half.
I would love to have you back. So, guys, watching this right now, make sure to follow Mike on Facebook. It is Mike.Taverna.7. Instagram, Twitter, it is Man of Steel MV. Make sure to follow Mike. And Mike, thank you so much once again for being here. We cannot wait to have you back.
Oh, you're the man. I cannot wait to be back myself. And anyone listening in India, thank you. Thank you for being a fan out of here for us over out in the States, because we're a fan of this show in the States. I'll tell you this right now. So for you to be a fan of us out there, we appreciate it.
Thank you so much.